I think the first thing that I would tell parents is that parenting ADHD is really hard, and that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Doesn't mean you're doing it wrong if it's hard. One of the things that we tell parents all the time is that good parents can have challenging kids. It's not a reflection on how good of a parent you are. It's not even a reflection on your child. Their brain is developing and working differently, so good parents can have challenging kids. It's not a reflection on you.
Welcome to Peds Doc Talk TV and this episode of the Peds Doc Talk podcast, where you can catch my amazing conversations with guests on the show here on my YouTube channel, or if you prefer audio only, wherever you access podcasts. I'm Dr. Mona Amin, a board-certified pediatrician, lactation consultant, and mom of two, and I'm here to uplift, support, and guide you so you can raise those incredible kids. Let's get to today's amazing conversation. Today's guests are Dr. Lori Long and Dr. Mallory Yee, child psychologists, founders of the Childhood Collective, a platform that helps parents find the confidence in raising kids with ADHD. And they're joining me to talk about parenting ADHD, tips and real talk with ADHD parenting experts. Thank you so much for joining me today, both of you.
Thanks for having us on. We're so excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to join you today. Thanks.
Yeah, and I was on your show. I really love the conversation we
Yes.
had on your show, talking about ADHD from a pediatrician standpoint, how to advocate. And so I'm so excited to have you all on today. And I know it's not just you two that have founded Childhood Collective. There's a third amazing part of your team who's not able to join us. Tell us more about your platform, yourself, and why you started the Childhood Collective.
Yep. So it's myself, Lori, and Mallory. We are both child psychologists. And Katie, who is not here with us today, unfortunately, she had a doctor's appointment for her son. But she is a speech language pathologist. So we have worked, for many years in private practice doing testing, therapy for kids with ADHD, autism. And we really found for our families of kids with ADHD that after their diagnosis, a lot of times they were given kind of an option of medication, and they didn't really get practical kind of tools or tips and strategies. And medication is great. It's an amazing tool. We talked about that obviously on our podcast. But many, it's not the only tool. And many parents still need help with, what do I do at home when they're having these behavioral challenges or these big emotions? What do I do at school when these things are happening? And really needing more tips and strategies. And a lot of times they were referred to like a child therapist. And if a child therapist doesn't have training and background in ADHD, it's very hard for them to kind of support parents. So we really felt like we wanted to provide science-backed tips and strategies to parents. And we do that through our Instagram, through social media. We also have online courses for parents to kind of help support their kids at home and at school. So that's kind of how we got started on it.
I love it. And I think, you mentioned already that if the therapist doesn't have experience in ADHD, but also a lot of pediatricians, I spoke about that on your episode or on your podcast, how myself included, like I know a bit about ADHD, but not nearly as much as you all know in terms of the actual parenting experience, right? I can talk to you about here's the resources you need and if we're going to do medication, whatnot, but there's so much more than that, right? We know that children with ADHD is such a multifactorial experience and also intervention. And my biggest pet peeve is colleagues of mine or, other people I'm hearing say to me, well, yeah, I just got this medication, but nothing else. There was no, what's happening with the school system? What's happening with behavioral therapy? What is the support system looking like for this child? Because it's not just medication. With pretty much everything I see as a physician, it's never the one thing. It's usually a combo of everything. So I love that you all provide that. And I have learned so much from both of you. I mentioned that on your show, but it is,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, it's so great. I love having this platform of mine because I become a better pediatrician by getting guests on who know way more about a topic than I do, which is, as an example, ADHD. So from the get-go, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
And we have learned so much from you as a pediatrician and having so many other people on our podcast, we just grow and learn so much, that things that you don't get in school, you don't get in grad school. So it's awesome to have
Yeah,
different perspectives.
and I think you touch on an important point, kind of going
Yeah.
back to what you were saying, Dr. Mona, about how parents really are thrust into this job of being an advocate for their child at school, at the pediatrician's office, with a child therapist who maybe doesn't specialize in ADHD. Parents need to specialize in ADHD, right? They
Yeah.
already specialize in their child, but they're constantly having to advocate for their child when it comes to family members who are uneducated about ADHD. Maybe a teacher, most teachers don't get training in ADHD specifically, or maybe it was just a part of one small class. So another reason we started the Childhood Collective is recognizing that these ADHD parents are in a very important position of advocating to their child, and they're the most important person to have this knowledge so they can advocate for their kids.
Yeah, I have learned the most from my neurodiverse ADHD families, like the ones that tell me, hey, this isn't working, this strategy's not working. And I'm like, let's dive deeper into this. So, what would be the first thing that you would tell every parent of a child who's just received a diagnosis of ADHD?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the first thing that I would tell parents is that parenting ADHD is really hard.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're doing it wrong if it's hard. One of the things that we tell parents all the time is that good parents can have challenging kids.
Yeah.
It's not a reflection on how good of a parent you are. It's not even a reflection on your child. Their brain is developing and working differently. So good parents can have challenging kids.
Yes.
And
It's not a reflection on you.
And we'll see this with families. I see this all the time with families who have one child with ADHD and another child that doesn't, and you parented them exactly the same. You use the same strategies, you feed them the same food, you do all the same things, and the things that you do for one just don't work for the other. And again, it is because their brain just works differently. And if, we also tell parents, like, if you're on social media and you're consuming a lot of parenting advice because you're struggling, we know so many parents of kids with ADHD are. A lot of those things might not work for you. And that doesn't mean you're a bad parent. That, again, your child's brain just works differently. And it can be, I know, frustrating when you're like, all these people are saying that these strategies should work and they just don't work for my child. If they do, that's awesome. And, that's great. But sometimes it feels like, oh, I must be doing it wrong because it isn't working. And that's not true at all.
Oh, listen, that's my pet peeve on all things parenting. And it's hard even as
I
I
know.
create content, right? Like when I create
Yes.
content, I'm literally hearing like a tip that I have. And I'm like, well, how does this apply to all children? And I even try to write in captions sometimes. I'm like, listen, this isn't going to apply to every child. I don't want you to ever think that you're failing if you're not, but it's so hard. But I appreciate when we provide that nuance for families, right? Because it is a huge reality. And I think like you said perfectly, can lead to so much guilt that I am failing my child when, like you said, kids are different. And I actually asked my community, they knew that you all were coming on, I asked my followers for questions. And the biggest question I got was how to support a child with ADHD when me or my partner don't have it. So, what would be your tip for these families that are trying to navigate this new diagnosis and may not know much about it from a personal aspect?
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually feel like we get the opposite question more
Mm.
of I have ADHD. How am I supposed to do all of these things?
Yes.
How am I supposed to help my child with organization, with executive functioning when I'm struggling with that? Like recognizing I'm not the best model of that, and you're telling me I have to teach him something that I haven't even solved yet.
Yeah.
So we kind of have, two different scenarios here. We have a lot of followers who have ADHD themselves trying to figure out how to raise a child with ADHD when they're still figuring it out themselves. But then, like you said, there are followers who are coming to us and they're saying, I don't have ADHD. I don't get it. How do I parent this child when I don't get their brain?
Yeah. And I think in working with those families, in trying to educate them, there will be a lot of times parents, when we do that first interview and they don't understand ADHD, right? And they're saying, my child is really defiant.
Mm.
They don't listen to me when I give them an instruction. And then when we kind of delve into that, it's like, well, they're not just a defiant. Some can definitely be defiant. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of times it's not. They hear an instruction and they get distracted in the middle of that instruction, or they haven't even heard the instruction. They're so hyper focused on whatever activity that they're doing that they literally did not even hear you, right? And so sometimes it is, when you don't experience those things yourself, it's really hard to understand, well, how can my child have we spent 2 hours on their homework last night, and then they went to school and didn't turn it in. And this is happening over and over again. Like, I know that they want to turn it in. They don't want to get a bad grade. Why is this happening? And they don't understand that executive functioning piece. And it's really is the first kind of component of working with families, is educating them about what ADHD is, executive functioning deficits that go along with that your child often isn't lazy, isn't unmotivated, but these things are really hard for them, and helping them understand that.
And in terms of executive functioning, if people are not familiar with what that is, you already kind of mentioned some of the things, but what are some things that what are some things that someone who has executive functioning may not understand that that's what it is? Like, how would you define that? What are some skills that go into that? And again, why is it that the ADHD brain has more difficulty with that?
Oh gosh, there's so much that goes into executive functioning. We kind of call executive functioning, it's kind of like the GPS of your brain.
Mm,
It's telling you where you need to go, like what's the end goal. We talk a lot about seeing the future picture. Like, how are you supposed to start a task if you don't even know like where you're headed,
yes.
what you're trying to work towards? So like, go clean your room. A lot of time kids have a hard time like visualizing like, what does a clean room look like? Like, I
Mm.
need to have that vision in my mind to know that to make my room clean, the laundry needs to be picked up. The Legos need to go away. I need to clean off my dresser. So one of those executive functions is kind of like seeing that future picture, forward thinking. Flexibility, cognitive, like shifting. So maybe you're on the way to that destination, but something comes up and your original plan isn't going to work anymore. So you kind of have to shift plans. Um, Working memory. So remembering the steps of the task in the moment when you're doing it. Avoiding distractions. So you're there cleaning up the Legos, but then you find some pieces that you think would make a really great cleaning. What did my son make recently? A super street cleaner or something like that had all these bristles. So you're supposed to be cleaning up the Legos, but then you see all these cleaning bristles and you're like, actually, I think I'm going to make the super street cleaner. So you get distracted. So it's all about knowing where you're going and actually being able to follow through all the way to get there. Our kids really with ADHD really struggle with that. And it's not because they're bad kids. It's not because they're naughty. It's because they have delays in the development of their executive functioning skills.
Oh, thank you
Yeah.
so much. I love that. Yeah.
And all kids have delays in executive functioning skills. We're developing those all throughout adolescence into early adulthood. But it's the difference is kids with ADHD are often, delayed more significantly than other kids their same age. So changing our expectations around what they are capable of is really important too.
You already mentioned a few misconceptions, right? You said that children with ADHD are looked at as lazy or defiant. What are some other misconceptions that you feel need to be clarified here and you hear often with your community online or with your patients that you see?
Oh gosh, a big one is that they're not smart, which is
Mhm.
just not true because they
Mm.
might be struggling at school, but it's not because
Aw.
they're not smart. Kids with ADHD are very smart. Kids with ADHD can be intellectually gifted,
Yeah.
but they can get kind of a reputation or be thought of as not smart because maybe their grades aren't great. But it's a lot of times it's coming back to those executive functioning skills and lack of support with those executive functioning skills that's contributing to the poor grades. It has nothing to do with their cognitive skills. So I'd say that they're not smart is a big misconception.
And along
Um,
those same lines, we hear a lot of families hearing from schools that their kids don't need accommodations or interventions and supports at school because they're smart, because
Mm.
they're getting good grades. So it's kind of like, well, their grades are good, even though they're getting referred to the office like numerous times a week for behavioral challenges. They're forgetting to turn in work. You're spending hours every night on homework. where they're sort of written off as needing those accommodations and supports because the grades are good.
Oh, yeah. And then so in that case, a lot of times it's just said, your kid just needs to try harder. They
Mm.
just need
Mhm.
to try a little bit harder. Just if they just applied themselves.
Um,
If it
And
was
it's
only
just,
that easy, yes.
I know, right?
We
Why didn't I think of that?
you wouldn't have the platform you have, and we wouldn't be talking about these things. Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
I think a lot
Exactly.
of the families I work with too, I will see one child that'll get referred, and it's the kind of classic hyperactive,
Mhm.
impulsive kid that's blurting out all the time, interrupting, they can't sit still. Those are the kids that are like first getting noticed, right? And then as we're kind of going through this process with their child, they're learning about attention and executive functioning and self-regulation as being these like core issues for kids with ADHD. And all of a sudden, like a light bulb goes off, and they're seeing their child who's not hyperactive. Like if anything, they can be underactive, but they're struggling with the same things of needing constant reminders at home, struggling with organization at school. They're not completing work and it's getting sent home. So I think many misconceptions around ADHD is that it's like always this hyperactivity, impulsivity. And for a lot of kids, especially girls, they can get unnoticed because they aren't having those external behaviors. They kind of fly under the radar, but they're struggling just as much with those executive functioning skills.
So a lot of time those kids are getting the label of spacey or daydreamy. And again, they just need to try harder and focus
Yep.
and all is good. I say that jokingly, of course.
Yeah.
I was Space Cadet Lori. That was my nickname at home for many years. So Spacey is a big one for girls. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we know this with a lot of neurodiversity in general, like autism being a different diagnosis as well. But yeah, like, I mean, there
Mhm.
is definitely girls tend to fly under the radar, get later diagnoses. And I see like a lot of peers on social media, like adults who have gotten diagnoses, like my female adults who have gotten diagnoses of ADHD in their adult life. And they've
Yeah.
just kind of, coasted or maybe not coasted and just kind of dealt with it. And then
Mhm.
they finally are like, no, I feel better knowing that I have this and that my brain works differently. And I think that's my misconception that I like to straighten out is that it's not a we talk about it being, obviously a variance in executive function, and it's just not a deficit but more a difference in how we learn. It's a just understanding that it's a uniqueness and difference and how we can
Yeah.
support that brain is so vital. And I think from a pediatrician standpoint, I think the modern education system in America is not very supportive of the
No.
diversity of brains, right? I mean, having
No.
any child sit and focus for that many hours. I mean, I don't even want to sit and focus for that many
No.
hours, and I'm neurotypical. It's not easy.
Yep.
And so I love when we can talk about that because it's not a dig on teachers, it's not a dig on that. It's a dig on a system that doesn't support ADHD children or neurodiverse children as a whole, and then it is feeling like failure. Like I see that. I see my kids coming in feeling like they can't keep up or that they're doing something wrong when really it's just maybe we're different. Maybe if we changed how we approach the school day and obviously there is accommodations that are needed to have, but I'm sure you all feel the same way with what you hear from schools and more so the parents and how
Yeah.
they're feeling that their children are approaching the school system.
When I had a little boy that I was interviewing the other day who's just a real hyperactive kiddo and the sweetest little boy, and he's very articulate, and he just said, "No one understands me at school.
Oh man.
My
Oh.
teachers don't understand me. The other kids don't understand me. They don't understand when I get up and have to move around." And it was, yeah, it's heartbreaking hearing that, but the kids are aware of it.
Yeah.
They see that difference in themselves too.
Oh, that breaks my heart because I get it. And, seeing it in my office and seeing that, especially when we start talking about meds, I'm not against meds. I've spoken about that on your show, but I want us to sort of empower these families and say, hey, here, what are some ways that we can support you holistically and also make you remember that you are an awesome child and that you have your own
Mhm.
potential here. I think I've
Yep.
spoken about this with y'all already. My husband has ADHD, but he's never taken medicine. And he became a
Mhm.
successful ER doctor. And I say that story because my husband could have been on medicine. He probably maybe will in the future, who knows, but he found a career that supports
Yes.
his ADHD, meaning it is a superhero strength to be able to to go all, be able to move and move and move and
Yes,
be active. And it's a superpower he has when I would get overwhelmed in that same situation. And
absolutely.
he's
Yep.
like, oh my gosh, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to be interrupted and do this and then move and move and move. And I say that because I just think it's so nice that we can foster the strengths of our children and support them in a school system, but also every parent not to look at it as like a negative, like this is who our kids are
Yes.
and how can we support it. And my little boy may have ADHD, he's only 5 right now, but like almost 5. And I say this because I'm like, I'm ready to support him if he needs it, but I know how hard it is. Like
Yeah.
I see that. We talked about that
Yeah.
from the beginning. It is hard because the
Mhm.
not everyone understands. If we had just more understanding, maybe it'll be easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think whenever you have a direct family member with ADHD, you should have your eyes out for that in your kids. And again, we just know it's a very heritable diagnosis. I would love to see research on ADHD and ER doctors, though, because
Yeah.
I feel like I've had so many ER doctors that have said the same thing. What's awesome is our business really is about helping kids understand their brains and having them gain that confidence in themselves and creating an environment to really support them, because we know that later on in life, once we give them those tools and they help develop the passions and the things that they're good at, they really can thrive. But in these school years, it is hard because schools are not made for ADHD kids.
Yeah.
They can't follow their passions. We all have to learn reading, math, writing, some things that they're maybe not as interested in, they're not as passionate about. And these years are just harder because of that. Yeah.
I
Yeah, but they do say that ADHDers find themselves in careers that do match their
Mhm.
brain type, and coincidentally, most of those look nothing like our standard education system.
Yes.
yeah.
Um, but I do wanna, like, offer a reassuring word to parents that with the right kind of supports and accommodations, your child can be successful at school. Your
Yes.
child
Yeah.
is not doomed for, what is it, 13, up through high school, 13 years of a miserable education career. It is possible to
It
kind of
is.
to have your child find success in the traditional education system with the right supports, though. And again, it's thrusting parents into this position of being an advocate, knowing what possibilities are out there for their child in the school system, and then educating teachers and even administration at the schools about what your child needs and making sure that that happens. It's challenging.
Yeah, and also it depends on where you are, right? I mean, I'm in Florida right now at the time of this recording, and the resources for neurodiversity in general, mental health in general is so hard here. And I know it's hard a lot in a lot of places, but like the access to just the support that we need, not only in a school system, it's so hard, but also outside. And it's just like kills me. Like I tell my husband, I'm like, I just want to start like an organization that helps neurodiverse families get the resources they need because it's so
Mhm.
valuable and it's so empowering like you are doing, right? I mean, we talk about this that I want us to empower these families and we know how hard it is. I see it. I see it every visit, every of my families coming in, not being able to find medication, back order,
Yep.
this, that, whatever it is, like feeling the stress and the weight of the school day. The kid comes home and having to sit down and do work when it's like their brain is just like, no, I don't want to do this. Like it is
Mhm.
so hard. And I attest to that as well from the pediatrician standpoint. And, Lori, you had already mentioned something about, parenting strategies, right? Especially on social media, we come in and we see all these great strategies, and especially the online movement of gentle parenting, and how that tends to be a lot of the focus on a lot of online parenting accounts. And, it may work for many
Yep.
children, but it may not for ADHD kids and maybe kids who don't have ADHD. What are some better ways to approach boundaries and discipline? I know this could be an entire course probably, but what would you say, to that family who's like, it's just not working. They don't listen. They
Yeah.
don't understand boundaries and discipline. What would be your, tip for that?
I mean, I think again, gentle parenting. There are going to be waves of different parenting strategies
Yes.
over the years that are like popular, right? And right now we're in gentle parenting. And there are some great things about gentle parenting that we do find very helpful and very effective for our kids with ADHD. And those are, we love validating emotions
Hmm.
and helping our kids start to have a language around emotions that might not otherwise like be able to communicate that effectively. So I think really that's an awesome thing that gentle parenting has done. I think the kind of idea of connection and spending time, that is like one of the things that we, especially when kids are really defiant, one of the first things we talk about as child psychologists is setting aside one-on-one time for 5 to 10 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be a lot, to just connect with your child, play, connect. You're not correcting, you're not it's not contingent on their behavior, them being good during the day. You're just spending time having fun, which we find is so important for kids with ADHD and parents especially, because a lot of times you're getting into this cycle of negativity where it's the relationship is feeling like, we hear from so many families, and I want to recognize that this is a feeling many families have, that I love my child, but I don't like being around them a lot of the time. And so we want to bring back some of that joy and some of that feeling of connection with families. And it's kind of a simple way of doing it and setting aside that time each day. And if you can't do it every day, if you have multiple kids, fitting it in whenever you can. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It could be talking to them at night. It could be reading a book with them. So that's a part of gentle parenting that I think is awesome.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about holding boundaries, and that's really communicated very well with gentle parenting of when I give a boundary on something, I'm holding it, I'm being consistent with it. That's so important for our kids with ADHD to be able to learn effectively. Some of the challenges with this for our kids who are neurodivergent is they tend to go from 0 to 100. And their 100 oftentimes looks very different than a neurotypical child, where they're becoming very physically aggressive. So I've had recently some kids in my office that are being, I'll give an example. We take lots of breaks, and I am very aware of transitions being hard for kids. So we have a timer. I give them warnings. When the break is over, we put toys away, bye-bye toys. And okay, it's time to get back to what we were doing. And I had one child and he was like, no. And so holding that boundary is essential, because I know if I don't hold this boundary, I'm never going to get through testing. I'm never going to get through the testing that day. Right. So it's bye-bye toys. And I'm getting hit, I'm getting kicked, I'm getting water bottles thrown at me. And so, I see these behaviors, and it's very hard. And even as somebody who's not a parent to this child, it's very dysregulating to be in those moments. And what I often see in those moments where parents will, again, if they're following kind of general advice, are, it's okay, I see you're mad, they're talking a lot, they're getting close to their kids. And that's when a lot of times that can really backfire for a number of reasons. One, it can be just unsafe. You're putting yourself in an unsafe position. I've seen therapists get, vases broken over their heads, doing things like talking a lot. For ADHD, we say minimize verbal instructions and talking as much as you can. It's just a lot for their brains to process. So we really try, if in those instances, I don't give a lot of attention to that. I kind of turn around. I kind of give as little attention, because if you're giving lots of attention, sometimes you're inadvertently kind of giving that, meeting that need that child has. They want that attention. You're inadvertently kind of reinforcing that behavior, and it might happen again and again. So really kind of giving as little attention to that as possible, and maybe giving a short redirection. I hear you're upset. I'm going to just stay over here until you're ready to calm down. Okay.
Well, Lori, how dare you? How dare you ignore the child? No, I'm just kidding, right? Like this is anti. No, I completely agree with that.
And if you're at home, again, the issue is we do see issues with abuse and whatever, because you can get dysregulated very easily in the face of very aggressive behaviors. And again, it's very dysregulating for a parent. So recognizing, especially if you have ADHD yourself and you get dysregulated easily, it's okay to go somewhere else and stay calm and take space. And I think that's where a lot of accounts might say, hey, you need to stay with your child. And I often see that like being a really bad situation for a lot of families. So that's one instance. And again, if I'm handling that in my office, I give limited attention. I might give a small redirection until that child calms down. And they do calm down pretty quickly. And I will tell you, most every time they feel horrible about that
Yeah.
behavior. They don't want to be doing those things. They feel
Yeah.
horrible afterwards. And we just go on like it didn't even happen. I pretend like it didn't even happen. Everything's back to normal. And I'm giving them lots of praise and attention, and we're going on about our thing.
No grudges held,
No
no
Yes.
grudges
guilt
held.
no guilt trips. We're
Yeah.
just
Are you,
didn't
do you
even
Yes.
know what
happen.
you
We're
just
moving on.
did? Right.
No,
It's
Yeah.
we're
such
not.
supportive. Yeah. I love that. It sounds
We
so
don't need
supportive.
to have, again, if we want to talk about that with an older child and process that, we're going to do that much further out of that situation where they
Mhm.
can have thought about it and talk about it. But in that moment, it's just not the right time. Again, we hear a lot about negativity around rewards and using praise and corrections, timeouts being these horrible things. And in fact, they're just very well researched.
Yes, they are.
Um,
Yep.
they're very well researched interventions, especially for kids with ADHD. And there's a lot of negativity around that. And I think part of that, especially with punishments and timeouts, is there's so much confusion about what a punishment is or what a timeout looks like. And maybe they aren't being used correctly. But you'll hear gentle parenting accounts saying like, oh, if you're not using that toy, then I'm going to take it, and if you can't use it appropriately, I'm going to take it and remove it. Well, that's a timeout. It's a timeout from positive reinforcement. You're
Yeah.
removing a positively reinforcing thing. That is a timeout. So again, I think there's a lot of issues with like semantics around things like that. But we do, again, for kids with ADHD, punishment is not going to be effective at changing behaviors. Punishment does not teach our kids new skills. It does not teach our kids what we want them to be doing. We really have a strong focus on teaching very clearly our kids, teaching them expectations, having very clear consequences that we've laid out with them that they're fully aware of, and doing a lot of praise and positive feedback and rewards, because kids with ADHD, their brains just really thrive with immediate feedback. They learn new skills much quicker when they have immediate positive feedback in their environment. And it also has the effect on us as parents of focusing our attention on the good things our kids are doing. And many times we talk with families and they're like, well, my child they're not doing anything good throughout the day.
Oh,
And a lot of times again, that might be true. Like there's a lot of challenging things, but there are moments that are positive. There are moments when they're doing those things. It's just hard for us to pay attention to those as parents. And that's not something you're doing wrong. That is our natural inclination as parents, is to put out fires. But we try and teach parents to really prevent challenges by teaching expectations, reinforcing their kids, teaching new skills, and teaching those executive functioning skills that they're lacking in. And again, that's really how we change behaviors, and that's our focus.
And I think it's important for parents to keep in mind that all of these tools are just one small part of your whole parenting toolkit.
yeah.
If you decide that you subscribe to the idea of praise, like that's not the only thing in your parenting toolkit, right? That's one small
Mhm.
piece, and you have all of these tools, and some of them you're going to use more sparingly than others, and you have to figure out like the right blend of those things that really works for your family. But again, just echoing what Lori said, like positive parenting, really focusing on what your child is already getting right and growing skills and supporting them in the areas where they do need a little extra support, it's like what they say, like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Like we're
Yeah.
really going to bulk up the front end of noticing when they're getting it right and building the skills so they can get it right more, rather than investing all of our energy into correcting them, because then that's when you get stuck in that cycle of correction after correction, and then your child starts to feel like they can't do anything right, you start to feel like they can't do anything right, and also you can't do anything right either because your parenting strategies aren't working. So it's all about, on that front end, the positive parenting for kids with ADHD.
And it's so applicable to all children, like we talk about, right? I love when I have these conversations when we're speaking about a topic that applies to our ADHD families, but positive, right? Lori, when you were mentioning about the negative cycle that parents can sometimes
Yes.
get into, I started getting teary eyed because that is actually like something I commonly see, whether it's an ADHD family or not. And what, like using an example of picky eating, right? My kid doesn't eat anything. I'm like, if we keep saying that, we're never going to eat anything. If you keep saying your child's a problem child, they're never going to learn anything. Like we self-serving prophecy is what I call it, right? We're going to keep feeding that behavior when actually let's look for the good. Like let's look for the good things that you did as a parent, but also the small little things. Maybe your child actually did something that they never did before and it's small, but that's huge, in terms of the positive reinforcement. And, I love what you mentioned also about the giving space, the quiet, sometimes it's okay to turn your back and say, take your moment. And that is one parenting strategy that I see online about the needing to co-regulate all the time, sitting with them.
It's
One, it's
exhausting. Yeah.
exhausting. Two, you may not have the mental bandwidth to do it, and then you're
Yes.
gonna you're gonna explode, and that's not gonna help. Number three, you may have another child in the room and you can't do that. Number four, you may have something cooking on the stove. And I've been there, right? Like I've been there with my 3, 4-year-old and my toddler, and it's like, take your time. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, but you just need a moment. That's an example that you gave in your office that I think is so valuable, that it is not a I abandoned my kid situation or that I'm ignoring my child's feeling. It's I recognize that you are going through something, but I'm going to give you a moment while I'm over there. I'm here to check in on you. And that is the nuance being lost a lot of the times, because there is no way any parent can co-regulate every moment. And honestly, from a child perspective, they need to also start to learn that they can handle it on their own, that I'm not going anywhere, but that you can do this. Like take your moment, and self-regulation is something that we need to teach. But I think parents fall so much
Yeah.
deep into this. I'm going to co-regulate and I got to co-regulate. And if I don't co-regulate, then my kid is not going to listen and, not understand their feelings, when that's not the extremes we want to
Yeah.
go into. So
And
love
and
that.
imagine if your child is tantruming, 20 times a day, which many of
Yes.
our families are. How emotionally exhausting that is for you and your child. And oftentimes they can get over those things a lot more quickly when we give them that time to calm and we don't, kind of draw ourselves into that. There's some funny like social media like videos and memes around like I start the morning off like with as a gentle parent, and then I'm screaming at the end of the night. And I
Yeah.
think it's funny because it's probably really true where
Yeah.
you're like, I'm investing all this energy, but then it backfires, and then I'm like losing it at the end of the day because I have nothing left to give because I've given so much.
Yeah.
Um, so it is definitely a balance, and it's not selfish. I want families to know this. It's not selfish to give yourself that time. It's actually important for you to be able to stay calm in those moments and give yourself that calm.
This was so amazing. I loved it. I love that we were able to talk about our ADHD families, but also the strategies apply to everybody. And part of the Peds Doc Talk podcast, I ask my guests what would be their final uplifting message for everyone listening today. So, ending it with a positive note, what would be what you'd want to tell people who are listening in regards to this conversation or parenting in general?
I would just say if you're an ADHD parent listening, you're doing an amazing job. And none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. I know about the negative cycle because I get in it all the time with
Yeah.
my kids when I know I shouldn't be. You're doing an awesome job. You are here listening to this podcast because you're trying to learn more. You're doing a lot of things for your child, and we see you. We know all of that, and we want to support you and say great job because I know a lot of times the feedback that you're getting is maybe the opposite of that.
Thank you both so much for joining me today. This was an amazing conversation. Where can people go to stay connected, find out about your resources and everything else you all have to offer?
A great place to find us is on Instagram at The Childhood Collective. We post almost daily. We also have our own podcast,
Yay!
Shining with ADHD. We have a blog full of tons of topics that are relevant for ADHD families. Our website is thechildhoodcollective.com. We also have a free guide for parents called 6 Keys to Raising a Happy and Independent Child with ADHD. That's a great place to start if you're new to us. So we hope that you'll check us out.
Yes, and thank you for coming on today. I love this. I love getting to learn from you all. Like I said, I learned so much from your account as well. So everyone, make sure to follow them along. And also, I will be attaching all of those resources to the show notes. And again, thank you, Mallory and Lori, for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you love this conversation, make sure to hit that thumbs up sign, share this episode on your social media channels, and subscribe to this channel to stay up to date on all future episodes and our weekly educational videos. Have questions or comments? Make sure to comment below, and I'll see you all next time. Stay well, stay loved, and keep on shining.